All right, see people entering the webinar. Hello, my name is Morgan and I'm the event manager at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. Soon, I will drop a link in the chat for where you can order a copy of Red Lip Theology for church girls who considered tithing to the beauty supply store when Sunday morning isn't enough, straight from PNP's website. You can ask our speakers a question tonight by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try to get as many of those questions answered towards the end of the event, but we apologize in advance if we don't have time to address your specific question. Also, there are auto captions for this event by hitting the live caption button at the bottom of your screen. Let's introduce tonight's guest. Candice Marie Benbow is a theologian, essayist, columnist, baker, and educator whose work gives voice to Black women's shared experiences of faith, healing, and wholeness. Named by Sojourners as one of 10 Christian women shaping the church in 2020, she has written for Essence, Glamour, The Root, Vice, Shondaland, Madame Noir, and the Me Too movement. Candice created the Lemonade Syllabus social media campaign, founded the media boutique Zion Hill Media Group, and in memory of her mother, established the Louise Marie Foundation to support HBCU nursing students and community mental health projects. A member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Candice holds degrees from Tennessee State University, North Carolina Central University, and Duke Divinity School. She will be in conversation with Brittney Cooper, the co-editor of the Crunk Feminist collection, and Feminist AF, a guide to crushing girlhood. She is the author of Beyond Respectability, the intellectual thought of race, women, and eloquent rage. A Black feminist discovers her superpower. In particular, this work interrogates the manner in which public Black women have theorized radical identity and gender politics, and the methods they use to operationalize those theories for the uplift of Black communities. Along with the work on Black female public intellectuals, Dr. Cooper studies Black women's organizations as sites for the production of intellectual thought. Please give our guests a virtual round of applause.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, Candice. Congratulations to you on the publication of this really wonderful book. Yes. So you said you would read a little bit for us. So Candice is going to read, and then we're going to have some questions, and then y'all get your questions ready in the Q&A. All right.
Yes. So I'm going to read a portion from Black Lace Teddies and Other Pieces I Rock Under the Anointing. Black feminist literature and theory broadened my horizons and my vocabulary for finding synergy. But while womanist theology gave me the language of my faith and religious expression, I still felt constrained by its purported ideals of Black womanhood. It felt like womanism preferred a certain kind of Black woman, a respectable one. And that didn't quite reflect me or sisters thinking like me. Though the womanist loved to publicly claim her, Monique Moultrie's sexual ethic, honoring various forms of intimate decision-making, was more for those sisters that the womanist would overlook. Creating a freeing sexual ethic for myself and offering it to my homegirls was essential to me. The cornerstone teachings cemented the truths of my Red Lip theology in place. 1, intimacy is holy. 2, God created us for interdependence and connection. When we honor that, we thrive. 3, intimacy is necessary. 4, touch is vital. 5, sex is healthy, necessary, and productive for reasons beyond reproduction. And 6, God respects our agency. 7, those of us who have the privilege of experiencing physical intimacy should do so as often as we deem necessary for our health, wellness, and desires. 8, people who identify as asexual or those for whom intimacy can be difficult because of physical or emotional limitations are no less valuable or important than those who experience physical intimacy. I believe our sexual agency should honor God who created us to be. This is why I don't believe premarital sex is inherently sinful. To me, any intentional act meant to disrupt our flourishing and block the light from within us is what is sinful. I believe that having sex before I'm married with someone I deeply care about isn't sin. Often, when women take this posture, it's assumed that we'll sleep with any and everyone who likes us. Now, to be clear, I don't think that hookups or opportunities to experience physical intimacy aren't necessarily sinful either. I do believe that I do believe interactions which allow us, Black women especially, to be touched and pleasured are holy. We deserve those kinds of experiences. But just because you think I look good and I think you're fine doesn't mean we're going to sleep together.
All right. I mean, way to kick us off and drop a bombshell. And I wanna talk about the politics of sexuality in this book, but I want to begin at an earlier point.
Mhm.
You have had quite the journey from the time that you sort of flippantly told a classmate, my theology is red lip theology, to this very full articulation that you spend this book developing as a kind of constructive theologian. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey and whether what you meant when what you said to him, does it mean something different to you today?
I mean, first, yeah, like when I said that, I actually had no idea what it would be.
Mm,
I just knew that I was trying to get out that conversation and he had gotten on my nerves. But the moment that I said it, it made so much sense to me. Like, this is who I am. And then the question became, okay, well then what is it? Like, what am I saying that I am? And there was this part where it was all about me trying to theorize it. Like I knew the right books, like I knew where to pull from and be like, okay, like I can build upon this. I can build, but it really wasn't until I had some really faith shattering experiences where I had to build it back from the ground up. And that was when Red Lip Theology became something that was not just a theory that I could posit, but something that I really knew to be true and live through and live in. And working to rebuild my faith really gave me a language to speak differently and articulate it differently. So it's been a journey. There's a part of me that's like, absolutely, I would have rather that in that moment, I would say I would rather have none of the experiences that led to what is this book and what is this movement, what is this theory. And at the same time, I know that allowing myself to be shaped and formed and reformed and reshaped because of those experiences leads us to a moment like this one.
yeah. And I want to talk even about that. So you talk about your faith sort of being shattered, but before you get there, you grow up in a church community. You were raised in the Baptist church in the South, and not to be confused with the Southern Baptist Church, because people.
Please, thank you. I
But
read that. Somebody called. I said, "Oh no, 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 no."
yes, no. In your answer, you might want to clarify for the people because it annoys me. But I wondered about you thinking of like you as a Southern writer and what this book means as an intervention in the space of the South, which is a very particular thing around Black folk in church.
Yeah, like one, it's so funny because someone said I grew up Southern Baptist, and I'm like, no, like I like Jesus was very much Black in my church, and slavery was very much a sin in my church. So like we, the kind of same parallels that only is the two words Southern and Baptist are the same in our instances. But there is something about the way that Black women in the South engage church communally. that was enmeshed in my life. The way that church was central to just our family, our friendships. And I really wanted to explore that because one, so much of my family that are like my kin, that I love, that I hold dear, are not related to me, but they are my aunties from church. Now they are closer to me than my aunts that are alive, but it was because my mama and them worked in church together and they raised their children together. And I wanted one to have a conversation that says, while Black church, we love to think through the institution of it, there are some differences in its iterations in the South and its iterations in the North. And I'm the girl who was raised in a Southern context where you are to be a Southern belle, a Southern Christian belle. Like there are certain ways that you are to carry yourself that are synonymous with both cultures. And living into that, rejecting that was a conversation that I felt like has to be told when you're having conversations about Black women in the South.
You know, that point you make about your aunties, you know, you're so effusive about your homegirls in this book, your aunties in this book. And it all seems to really stem from a particular attendance to a Black feminist or womanist ethic. Now, the sort of conversation about Black feminism versus womanism, I love the ways that you resist that in this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wonder, you know, but one of the things I see you doing that I think is, you know, really useful and helpful is you seem to be staging a conversation between Black feminism and womanism and the church, which is to say, like, you're saying not just the church needs Black feminism, but I almost read you to be thinking about what happens if Black feminism attends to the church too, right?
Yeah, like I think that there was something to when I have a essay, We Should All Be Womanists.
Yeah.
Like when I sat back and really thought about my introduction to Black feminism, it was not a formal one, right? Like case in point too, like this past week my family and I have been laughing at the memories of the ways that they resisted in church. So we had a trifling pastor that they wanted to get rid of. And my aunt was like, bet, nobody, we're paying tithes because again, we're Baptist. So she was like, we gonna pay tithes, they just gonna be a penny. And so everybody, my mama, all of them were writing checks for 1 cent. because they wanted to make it clear that you don't run this space and you can't make moves without us. 2 Sundays. It only took 2. And he came up the 3rd Sunday to the church and was like, at the end of the month, I'm leaving. Like it only took 2. And so that kind of ethic that says you will respect me, that you will honor the work that we do, like I saw it there before I even really had the name for it. Growing up in a house where my mama was taking me to Bible study, but she was also cutting out Susan Taylor's letter to the editor in Essence, and she had cut out with Dr. Renita Weems's essays in Essence and had them folded up in her Bible and in her purse. Like I grew up in a space that said we need both of it. Like we need faith, but you are also grounded in an understanding that as a woman, as a Black woman, you deserve dignity and you deserve respect. And you should not allow anyone or anything to manipulate that and to disregard that. And so sometimes I do feel like that it feels counter-institutional, right? Like that there are these two spaces that are also just looking at each other, waiting for better conversations to thrive. And I hoped that Red Lip Theology could live in the center of that, to say that there are some of us who grew up in that space, didn't really know how to articulate and name that it was that space. You know, I didn't know that I was reading womanist theological texts when my mama was giving me her Weems books after she finished them, or her Iyanla Van Zandt books. I didn't know that that was that until I got to school and was like, oh, this is a whole discourse, right? But there are a lot of us who saw our mamas navigate that kind of power, even if they didn't give us the language for it and we didn't have the language for it. And then now the question for me is, how do we live fully into that space and into that articulation, so that it's like there are those of us who don't have to abandon church, but we can say, no, you need to be a better life space and a better safe space for me.
Yeah. I wonder about what you are pointing to is this sort of long history of the ways that Black women resist at an everyday level. And I wondered about the like importance of documenting that, because the narrative right now in this kind of more progressive Christian space is it's really dominated by white women, some of whom we love. Rachel Held Evans, rest her soul, who I know is your friend, Sarah Bessey, all of these sort of white girls who came through a decade ago saying this don't work for us, right?
Right.
And then, we haven't had a comparable discourse in the popular, right? It has really happened in the academy. And I wonder about why you think it's taken so long for this conversation for Black women to move out of the spaces of the academy, or out of these more localized spaces like what you grew up with, to this broader conversation.
To be honest, I think we had conversations where we were really given room and space to have them. Like, the ability to talk about faith in these kinds of ways, the resistance that I've gotten, right? And it shuts us immediately down, so that there can only be one kind of Black woman of faith speaking in the moment. And she has to be very conservative. She has to be somebody who will affirm in a very different way the very sexisms and patriarchal narratives that we're pushing against. And so then you get in the academy where you have much more freedom and that's where I when I knew I had a call, I knew it wasn't to preach. Like, I saw people who, and I can preach, but that was the only example I had, was that I could be a clergy woman. It wasn't until I got to school and I saw Black women who were writing in the ways that I wanted to write, and I was like, oh, I can be a theologian. Like, I can actually teach this. I can teach preachers. But then the bigger problem was, in the academy, I'm not talking to the women that I actually want to talk to, and I actually want to talk, have these conversations with. And so it was like, how do I navigate, make room, make waves, make spaces to have more public discourse? But when it came time to have the conversation about, when I met with publishers, it's like, I want you to care enough about me and other Black women faith writers coming behind me to prop us up like you prop the white women that you like, and that we deserve to be in that conversation, especially when data and research says that Black women are the most religious demographic in America. How are we the most religious, but we can't be the ones that's writing the most? That we are not a large demographic there. And so I feel like that tide is turning. I feel like there are a lot of movements that have taken place that have called publishing to account, that I'm benefiting from. Like, it was work that sisters who didn't get deals and who didn't get opportunities that were knocking at that door that I now have an opportunity and blessed to walk through. But I feel like it has been the ways that these institutions, our institutions, work to try to silence Black women.
Yeah. And so, but also, so let's hold this nuance, right? That on the one hand, there's this structural thing. On the other hand, you and I were kikiing a bit before we came on about, but also we're daughters of the church.
Yes.
We know how church girls get down. They come up in that conservative thing, and so how are you navigating that resistance? Which, because I ain't seen no fire like the fire when you start to question conservative biblical interpretation, all of the stuff. How do you, how are you navigating that? Because it's easy to be a Black feminist and a womanist when folks are like, "Yay, we love each other," but when folks is coming for your neck, how?
Yeah, like I mean, I think it was last year when someone sent me a link of this a refutation that people did of me on, it was 3 hours on YouTube about how dangerous I was. And at first I laughed. But then they brought my mama in it and I was ready for them to pull up, right? Like it was that moment where like folks had to say, like, you actually got some stuff on the line. So I need you to pull that Winston-Salem back just just a little bit. But and they were all women. That was the part. Like I like when I talk, I know their brothers are coming for my neck. I know that they are gonna insult me. I know that they are gonna send sneaky, subtweets. And usually when I catch them, I quote tweet and say what I gotta say, right? But it's one thing when they do it, it's another thing when sisters do it, because you get to this point where you like, I'm doing this for you too. I'm taking these hits too for you. Because what I do know is we grew up in the same context. So whether or not you are honest about your questions and your wrestling, you question it and you wrestling. Whether you are committed to telling that truth, you're still doing it. So don't allow for, I can't, one of what has, I've had to learn to have a thick skin. I've had to, it don't mean it hurt less. Like I've had to try to stop defending that I love the church, to kind of like, to be this qualifier of the work I do. It's like, no, like that's the problem. Like that we feel like we gotta apologize and for taking up space. And no, like this is what I do, right? I am trying to do this. I know what I'm doing, and that doesn't make me any less that doesn't make me any less holy, any less active in faith. It doesn't make me any less anointed. But it's hard. Like it's a dangerous space to sometimes be a Black feminist, to be a Black woman who speaks truth, especially in this moment where it feels like evil descends as soon as you say something that the forces and powers that be don't like. And it's like, I'm doing this for all of us. And the main people who look like me, who should be supporting me, or at least respecting my argument, even if they don't agree, are the ones that's spewing the most vitriol. And as the late great Reverend Dr. Katie Cannon said to me once, they doing white people's work. They doing white people's work for them. Even as they talk about how much they don't like and ain't white people, they doing white people's work. Okay. And so I've had to keep that at the forefront of my mind as I push through to do what I know I'm called to do.
Yeah. So per the excerpt that you read, one of the spaces of resistance, but one of the spaces I think this book is going to be really critical for in terms of is helping Black women in the Black church get free around sexuality. Yes. But you really document your journey and look poignantly and humorously and painfully and all of it, and it's gorgeous. And yet I'm like, okay. Is the Black church ready for this sexual revolution that you're trying to bring?
Absolutely not. Like it's so funny because I'm like, we gotta have healthier conversations, right? Like maybe you don't invite me to the church and I talk about my top 5 favorite vibrators. Maybe I don't do that, right? Or maybe I do in some congregations. But there is a space for us to talk about the holiness of pleasure, the holiness of physical touch, the holiness of intimacy, and sit with the nuances of that the argument about sex is not as black and white in scripture as we want to make it. And so if it is not as black and white, then how do we have the conversations that help to create the space where people themselves, women themselves, give themselves permission to explore? Like, we have been in a pandemic where we have lost over 800,000 people. But for the duration of this, many people have gone without physical touch, right? That like to touch you, to be in this intimate space with you is dangerous and life-threatening. Why can we not have conversations about the theological implications of that, especially when we're talking about Black women who believe that if I withhold touch from me, if I withhold pleasure from me, then I'm doing a service to God, right? Like I think that it is long time that we push these conversations. I will say I'm excited because this week we found out that 3 churches are using Red Lip Theology for their book of the month
Okay.
to talk through. So like, and then I think last week I found out that the Baptist Women's Association, they're using it. And so I'm excited because that means that it is being intentionally discussed in church context and what that will mean for conversations going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that some of the resistance about sexuality, though, is also a way that the church can control Black women and keep them, tethered? Because, I mean, so many of these Black male preachers in particular use sexuality as a cudgel against Black women, right? And use it as a way to say, like, you got to keep coming and you can't get none, So then they always have a labor source, right?
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And it shrouds you in guilt and in shame. One, because when you desire a relationship and you feel like you're ready, I can talk about myself. I can talk about friends that I have who still do this. We go on fast. We tithe. We sowing more seeds. We're being more active in church because we believe that kind of productivity, that kind of labor then translates our worthiness to God. And then when it goes left, we go back to those same things because how did we get here? How do we miss the signs? How do we, oh, I missed the signs. I wasn't focused. So now I gotta go. I need to be in church. I need to be there on Friday nights for prayer meeting because when I was in my relationship, I wasn't there on Friday nights. And so it becomes this like vicious cycle that is all about the ways that we remain tethered to these diminished views of ourselves that translate into the ways that we will give what we don't have to the church to prove something that we don't have to prove, right? That we are already good, we're already valuable, and it's not because of what we do. It's just simply because of who we are.
Yeah. Now, one of the other revolutions you trying to bring to the church is a beauty revolution. I mean, so first of all, tell the people which red you rocking tonight.
So this is Nars's Star Woman. Yeah, this is Nars's Star Woman. I love, love it.
Nice. I put on some Stunner lip paint just for you.
I love Stunner. I actually love Stunner. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Yana, I mean, Fenty is great. It's great. And I've had the pleasure of going to Sephora with Candice. She is, considered a celebrity when she walking. I mean, I've seen like random people fangirl her in the Sephora, and all the store stops and is like, "What you need?" So it is her place. But so why do you think what do you think this sort of discourse on beauty, like why is it important for Black women in this moment? Because as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, for our whole lives we heard, man looks on the outward appearance but God looks on the heart, and here comes Candice saying, well, get your beat together. So
right. I mean, no, one part of it was I wanted to have a conversation about Red Lip Theology. I mean, I wanted to have a conversation about faith that did not center Black cishet men, right? That we could have a conversation about faith just ourselves, that did not include them. Like the number of men who have reached out to me and was like, "What's primer?" So like it has been the funniest thing ever. But like there's something about the way that we feel when we put on makeup, right? That like we can be having the worst day ever, but when we put that on and then look at ourselves it's like, all right, let's go. I can do this. And I remember that like at a really tough time for me, those trips to Sephora were what was saving my life and was what was really holding me together. And I remembered to talk about Fenty, Rihanna's Anti album was out at the same time, and I was playing in makeup and listening to that album. And one of my homegirls was like, "So you do know that this is kind of ritual for you?" And I said, "Is it?" And she was like, "No, this is ritual." And she was like, "I think you should really sit down and think about what all of these things mean for you." And I did. It was like it was literally like 2018, 2017, 2018. And I wrote down, I was like, wow, like my blush makes me feel confident. Like, and and then I started like when I would do my face and I was putting on my eyeshadow, I was like, let everything I see today bring me hope. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted, because I needed it for what I was going through. Like I was in, and a lot of people only saw it on socials, but those who were really, really connected to me knew that I was in a really hopeless moment and a hopeless place. And there are times I was like, just let my spirit feel warm. I was putting on bronzer. And I wanted us to think through how at our best sometimes, even when we are not always on point, how we feel when we put on makeup, how we feel, and it might not even be that makeup is your thing, but you know how you feel when you put on that outfit, when you put on those pair of shoes, when you put on those earrings. And it's like, how do we find a way to remember that feeling and lean into it consistently? And that's really what I'm hoping that sisters get as they read the book.
yeah. Y'all put your questions in the Q&A. We coming to y'all in just a couple of minutes, but I got a couple more questions. One of the harder parts of this book, I mean, you have been you've had some deep and dark days that you have written your way out of, it
Yeah.
seems. And but I also wonder, like, I got the distinct sense that one of the things that you do is take the church to task for its inability at so many levels to handle Black women who are depressed, who don't have it all together, right? Who don't fit this particular model of strong Black womanhood. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I remember when my mom passed, and I sat in church and heard a um, if you delight yourself in the Lord, He'll give you the desires of your heart. And I remember sitting there and was like, well, I don't know anybody who delighted themselves more than my mama, and she died alone. So where's that? The weeping may endure for the night, joy comes in the morning. I remember being told that that God wouldn't put more on me than I can bear, and this was going to make me stronger. And I was like, I didn't lose a job. I lost my mom, and it was this expectation that I would have this outlook that, oh, it happened, hallelujah, anyhow. And there was really no space for me to be very honest about losing her was totalizing. You know what I'm saying? Like that it was totalizing. And and then, I talk very openly about experiencing assault and the ways that and all of the other things that happened to me in a very short amount of time. And the fact that you can't shout your way out of that level and depth of pain, right? Like that you're gonna have to do some work. And sometimes it just hurts. I don't believe we were meant to experience those kinds of pains and those kinds of terrors. And still, what does it look like for us to reject these kind of narratives of like, I almost lost my mind, but God, like He'll keep your mind. Like, no, like I fought for mine. Like there was a moment when I lost it. Like, and God kept me, right? I really hope that also the conversations, and I'm really excited because I feel like we're having different mental health and faith conversations than we ever had before. And I hope that they continue. And I hope that we can break a certain kind of ground that gives us room to really sit with the nuances of mental health and faith, and that they are not in competition with each other, like but they are realities, and that we can figure them out if we're given healthy and proper tools. And I'm really grateful that I got them. I'm really grateful that I got them.
Um, so you have a chapter called leaving church, and so I wonder a couple of things about that. One, you really talk about a kind of more fluid and expansive theology, which I would love for you to say a bit more about, but also, um, you know, well, before you say that, you say this thing about deciding that you weren't going to go to church for a while and that you wondered who you would be without the church. But as I was reading, I was thinking, but who would the church be without you, right? And
Mhm.
without all, this generation of Black women who are like, this ain't working for me no more. And so if we have a mass exodus out of the church, like is the Black church becoming obsolete precisely because it doesn't seem fully able to adapt? um
The sad part is, I would say to that question, yes. Like, it's so funny because I didn't even think about that in that way until you said it. But the the full circle moment in that essay for me, or even through the book itself and my journey, is that I didn't necessarily have to leave. I didn't necessarily leave church, but I had to realize that it could not be the epicenter of my spiritual development and of my faith, right? Like, I'm a member of a church now. It was so funny because on watch night of 20 this past watch night, like I tweeted, I was like, I know 2022 gonna be bomb for me because I logged on to church every Sunday in 2021. And everybody was like, what is happening? You went to church. I was like, I know. But the truth is that every sister ain't gonna do that. Like there are some who walked away and was like, I'll never step foot in there again. What did the church lose when she walked away because of the harm that they would not account for and account to, right? I will always maintain, especially for millennial women and younger sisters, that the totality of our spiritual lives can't necessarily be found in church space. Like a lot of us have had experiences where that have been beautiful and have been divine and have been full of spirit that were not church connected. You know, there are still some churches, Black churches, that are woefully against and adamantly against ancestral veneration, and will talk to you and say that if you are a Christian, if you are a child of God, ain't no way you communing with your ancestors. What I know is my mama talked to me and I feel my mama. And when I need to hear from my Aunt Dolly, I get in that kitchen and I make a yellow cake with chocolate icing and just steel myself. Like I have my great grandmother's pot. When I need to get grounded again, I start cooking greens and I cook them greens in that pot. You know what I'm saying? Like there are so many beautiful experiences. For a year, I was a part of a Buddhist faith community, and they welcomed me the first day I was in there, I said, now y'all, I'm gonna tell you right now, like, I'm taking a hiatus from the church. I'm Baptist. I don't know too much about Buddhism. I only saw what's love got to do with it. And then they just started laughing. I was like, but I want to be here and I want to learn. And the prayer walks that we did every Sunday, the chants, the recitations, the moments of silence. Like I felt God in all of them. And so where I have now found myself is I look for God and spirit in all things, and have opened myself up to the ways that all of these vast experiences have gone into the making of me. I think about how I probably was always this girl. Like my mama used to proofread my questions in Bible study because she was like, you're not gonna make me look crazy by asking these questions, and my grandma said the same thing. Like it was like, don't you go in here and say, and so I think that was always in me, but I wasn't in a place or a community that really allowed for it to really thrive. And now I am. And I just think about like, when I become a mom, like, or the young girls and young kids that are in my life, how do I encourage that kind of flourishing and that kind of fluidity in them so that they don't get to my age and be like, oh, I needed this all along.
Yeah, I love it. All right. We're going to take some questions.
Okay.
All right. So Melissa Williams asked, it has been some time since I've had to wrestle with something like I've had to wrestle with this. As Black women, our faith is such a crucial part of our identity and spirituality, essential to our cultural identities across the diaspora. It may have been Professor Crunk's work that first got me to question how the church benefits from Black women's labor and our singleness keeps us in greater servitude to these institutions. What does our service to the church look like with Red Lip Theology?
Ooh, I think our service to the church is we provide a mirror to the church of who the church can be. And it remains the service of accountability and truth telling that is important. But I also think that the other piece is that we may often think too much about what we give the church. and what our service is to the church, and not necessarily what our service to be should be to each other and to ourselves. And I think that for me, that's where Red Lip is grounded. And how do I give myself the fullness of an authentic faith, and from there mirror to the church what it means for them to partner with me in that.
Yeah, you got a similar question about that. How do we help our sisters understand that we have to disentangle ourselves from faith and love being so transactional? Speaking to how we tithe more, go to revivals, fry chicken in the church basement kitchen in response to love loss. How do we get more of us to demand more?
We have to talk about it more. We have to, and I think it happens in the community of each other, that we like, hey, like, nah, like I like it's so funny. I think I talk about it like it's the accountability of the sisterhood, to be like, hey sis, like you're not really flowing the way that you need to flow. Asking the questions of like, why do you think that that is what you need to do in order to be seen and heard? I think we just have to keep talking more. I think sisters also have to be open to the ways that sisters talk to them, um, and encouraging them about how they look at love differently. Like the next project I'm working on is a book about love and relationships, because I'm tired of us talking to dudes on the internet and asking them what's wrong with us, and them telling us that we sixes and or telling us that we gotta not have sex for 90 days so that we can see it. And the truth is that, like, when we eat that up, we continue to live into these kind of false realities. And so we gotta be willing to hear our sisters when they tell us it's another way.
Yeah, word. Um, you got a question, this from an anonymous commenter. Thank you, Candice, for being a trailblazer and doing this very holy work. You talked about not being a preacher, although you can preach, but being a theologian. How would you now describe the work that God has called you to do?
Ooh, um, I think that as a writer, I'm called to have conversations that bring life, that invite us to see what's possible beyond brinks and beyond, like, it's that moment after the dust settles from a catastrophe, and you get to survey the land to see, okay, do we just walk away and build something new? Or is there still something here that's worth salvageable? Like, I think that I've been called to that moment to say how much power you have in that moment. That's not a place of defeat, but it's a place of true power. Yeah, I don't think I ever preach. I get invited to. I'm not a preacher. I don't ever want to be licensed or ordained. But I do know that God called me to this, and I knew that as a little girl. And I'm grateful that I was able to see images and see models of women that I could then pull from to be like, oh, this makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you also got a question. Is it worth it to partner with women in other churches, such as the Hispanic church, Asian church, etc.?
Absolutely. There are women in those traditions that are fighting the same battles. There are books that work that's being chronicled in Mujerista theology and Asian American feminist theology that speaks to where they are fighting against the same fighting against the same forces. And I think that there's a way that we make room for our own particularities as we fight a common enemy. So absolutely, I think it's worth it.
Yeah. You got a comment from Melissa just saying thank you, and your answer to her question about what does our service look like with Red Lip Theology, that we have to rethink what fellowship looks like.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
You also got a quick question about, I don't know if the answer would be quick. Any comments on liberal feminism versus radical feminism?
I mean, I am one of those that it continues to blow my mind how somebody was asking me, it's like, what wave are we in? And I was like, it continues to blow my mind about the ways that we continue to delineate. I don't know if it matters to me much to speak differently about radical feminism and liberal feminism, as much as I think it matters to honor that each generation is pushing very differently, and we can learn from all of them. Like, I look forward to the day that somebody tells me Red Lip Theology didn't go far enough. Like, I look forward to that day, and because I think it's coming, and the way that the young people are, it's coming sooner rather than later. And I think we got to be open for that level of uncomfort so that each generation can move in the space that they need to.
Yeah. Well, I hope that before they decide that you didn't go far enough, that they look at how far we've actually come.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this book. I can't wait to see all the new paths it blazes. Are there new stories that you are excited that you think this book will open up the space for? New stories.
Ooh, yeah, like I'm really hopeful about mother-daughter relationships. I'm getting a lot of messages from mothers and daughters who are reading it together. And one that warms my heart because I wish I had that opportunity. But the ability for them to have certain conversations that this book has opened a path to has just been amazing to me. So, I mean, I think right now, that's where my heart is most full. Right before we got on here, I was reading reading a message from a mom and a daughter who her daughter was able to finally confess that she was in a relationship that she had no business in. And told her mama, she was like, I never knew how I was going to tell you. And they got to that essay in my book, and her mom confessed that years ago she was in the same situation, and her daughter was able to say, well, and so they thanked me because that led to a truth moment. And now her mama was funny because she was like, and I said some stuff I can't put in this DM. She said, but thank you. And so I'm just, right now, I think that as Black women, mothers and daughters talk about how they engage church differently, like, I'm just really excited about those conversations.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We have come to the end of our time. So our Politics and Prose representative is going to join us, our events manager. Thank you again, Candice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before we go, since we have just a little bit time before the hour wraps up, we would love if both of you would tell the audience what you're reading right now.
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, wow.
So I have fell in, and I'm trying to finish it because I know the next book is either already out or coming out, but Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. I am engrossed. So that is where I am. And I think she has another one that either came out this week or next week, but that's what I'm reading.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm like, what am I reading today? I'm like working on a new book of essays. So I'm reading Best American Essays of 2021, all things June Jordan. Yeah.
I'm really glad you mentioned Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, because we actually have an event with Jane Allen for her second book on February 10th.
Oh, wow, that's what's
Black Girls Must Be Magic. So thank you for the shameless plug.
Yeah.
We also have Yeah, I like that one too. I've read her first one. And we definitely have copies of Best American Essays and that whole collection in the bookstore. We thank you all for tuning in tonight. Thank you for spending some of your Friday evening with us. Um, on the behalf of Politics and Prose, thank you, Candice, for having this event with us. And thank you, Dr. Cooper, for being an excellent moderator for us once again. We love when you stop by. And on you all's way out, virtually out, please check out Candice's book, Red Lip Theology. The link is in the chat. We have copies at our stores. Please order one. We also have book plates that she signed, and we will send those out as well. And everyone, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.